Welcome everyone to another amazing episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. I'm your host today, Jesse, and with me is the bearded wonder, Andrew.
That's a new one.
Yes, it is a wonder why he has that beard. Anyway, today's podcast is pretty cool. If this is your first time joining us, this is an Ontario-based fishing podcast with two crazy hosts that talk about sometimes catching fish. So it is a relatable podcast. We don't talk about crazy bass boats or crazy radar technology and all that stuff or UFOs. Yeah, sometimes we talk about UFOs. I'm not going to lie, we do. But it's a fun episode we're going to get into today. It's not 100% about necessarily fishing techniques, but it is about stuff that you could possibly encounter while you're fishing. Now, are those good things? Probably not. Some of these things may be scary. Some of these things may haunt your dreams for the rest of your life. We apologize. Unfortunately, before we talk about this, we're going to talk about something even more terrifying. And to handle that interesting fishing fact of the week, we have Andrew talking about something terrifying.
That's right. I'm going to be talking about
your mom.
Parasites.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I thought you were going to say we're going to be talking about your mom, and I was going to be like, yeah.
No. People have 2 week constitutions for that topic. So we're going to be talking about ticks.
Ew.
We're going to talk a bit about... Now, have you ever had a tick, Jesse? Have you ever
honestly
had a tick
with
on
the
you?
amount of time I've spent out fishing at the creeks, camping and all this stuff, I've never had a tick.
That blows my mind.
Never had one. But here's the thing. I also do wear long pants and socks, and I don't wear shorts a lot for sun protection. But I'm surprised I've never had one. And some of my buddies that go fishing, they get them all the time.
I've had my share. Have you ever even found one on your clothing, though?
Nope.
Wow.
Never.
So, for anyone listening, Jesse's experience is few and far between.
Yeah.
The chances of you coming into contact with one of these 8-legged arachnids is high. Yeah, they're not an insect, they're an arachnid. So, these the most common we have are the black-legged or deer tick. They have a really fascinating life cycle. We're going to go into the life cycle, and also what people are often afraid of is Lyme disease. But we're primarily going to focus on the tick themselves. So first of all, we need to point out ticks are not venomous and they are not painful, but they can carry the bacteria Borrelia burgdorferi, which sounds like some fancy chef name or something.
It sounds like some fancy dish. What would you like today,
Borrelia burgdorferi.
Extra cheese on the top.
I'll take 2. So that bacteria causes Lyme disease. Now, again, not all ticks in Ontario or Canada or the world carry Lyme disease. There are a few 3 different areas in the world that have a higher ratio. Even like from town to town, there'll be a higher ratio of ticks that have it as opposed to those that don't. But it does change from time to time, even from area to area primarily. The cool thing, or the one good fact about Lyme disease is it is only, you can only get it during the second stage of the tick's life cycle. Usually it'll take 24 to 36 hours of that tick having been on you and feeding to transfer that Lyme disease to you. So that's why it's always important. They've written country songs about it. You should always check for ticks after you've been in the woods, because if you catch it soon enough, you are not at risk for Lyme disease. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Many people think it's like getting bit by a dog with rabies. It's like, that's dangerous immediately. Not the case with ticks. So first of all, some cool abilities. Ticks are expert hitchhikers. And they can actually kind of choose the ride they want to get, much like we do on an Uber app or hailing a taxi. They can sense their heat, the body odor, and even the breath of the hosts from a distance, allowing them to precisely maneuver themselves or target to make sure they get onto that animal. They're also very patient. So unlike flying insects that will fly, like mosquitoes you think of that are chasing you, or horseflies, they're terrifying because they'll actually fly after you. Ticks don't. They play the waiting game. They're not quite an ambush predator, but they will sit on edges of branches or in tall grasses, and they're just waiting with their legs in the air, waiting for something to brush past, and they'll just grab on, and then they'll find a nice hidden crevice and bite you. They have specialized mouth parts that are designed to anchor into the skin and then start working their way feeding on your blood. Again, they are a parasite. Now, the best way to avoid tick bites is by wearing long sleeves, tucking your pants into your socks, which I have done now whenever I'm walking in tall grasses and whatnot. Using insect repellent containing DEET, that can help as well. And again, very important, don't forget to do a full body tick check when you get home. They love to hide in those hard to spot areas. The first tick I ever got was in my belly button, and I didn't know. I was having a shower and I looked down and I saw legs hanging out of my stomach, and I was about 12 years old, and I had recently seen The Matrix 1. And you know that scene when like put that like weird like bug and it goes into the guy's navel, like Neo's navel? That's what I was imagining, and it freaked me right out. So I didn't start off, with like, oh, they're cool, and then later I found out they were bad. I found out about them in the worst possible way. Now, thankfully, I did not have Lyme disease. I was on, after that first bite, though, we weren't sure how long it was on me. So I did go through some drugs and stuff like that to make sure that I was clear in my system. We're going to talk a bit about the life cycle now of ticks, because that is honestly one of the coolest things. Like, you think of like a butterfly, and it's like, oh, it starts as a caterpillar and then it grows up and it molts into a butterfly. It's cool. Ticks have such an interesting life cycle. We're going to talk about the 4 different stages: the egg, the larva, the nymph, and the adult. So first stage, the egg stage. An adult female tick lays thousands of eggs, often in the spring, and they're usually laid in damp, leaf-covered areas or tall grass. After a few weeks to a couple of months, the eggs hatch into larvae, making the next stage of life. The larva stage of ticks, they're often called seed ticks, because they're the size of like a small poppy seed. They're very small. They have 6 legs at that point in their life, and they are looking for their first meal. As soon as they hatch, they're on the hunt. They need to start feeding. So they'll often find their first host is small, like a bird or a rodent. So they'll attach, feed on the blood. Now, the larvae don't transfer the Lyme disease because they don't have it yet. They get the Lyme disease from their first host. So after their first blood meal, the larvae, they'll drop off their host once they're full, and they molt into the next stage, the nymph. The nymph is now the 8-legged version of the tick. Still very small, about the size of a pinhead when it hasn't fed yet. And again, they seek out another blood meal from other hosts. So this is the stage when we often get them on us, as they've gone up to the top of branches and whatnot. They're looking for that meal. They send out they're holding their legs out, waiting for us to walk by. So deer, dogs, humans, horses. Now, this is most likely when they're going to transmit that disease, because they've gotten it usually from rodents, and then humans, where now they bite us, and if they're on there for long enough period of time, the bacteria will make its way into our body and we become infected. Now, the nymphs, they're small. So like I said, when they find a hidden area, sometimes like inside corner of the ear, in your hair, down in any crevice on your body, things like that, that is what they're looking for, behind the knee, anything like that. And they can latch on there and they'll feed. So if they're sitting there for days, and their feeding process usually takes days on you, or on their whatever their host is, that's when you're at risk. And we'll go into at the very end kind of a little bit about how Lyme disease does enter your system. But for now, we're going to move on to the adult stage. So again, they've fed their second time, they drop off, they molt. Now, adult. So now they're about the size of an apple seed. They're looking for their final meal. Ticks only feed 3 times in their life. So now the females, they require an even bigger meal than the males, because they need to lay the eggs. So these females, they're looking for, again, large hosts, deer, dogs, humans. Now, most of the time, Lyme disease is not found in these adult ticks. Lyme disease has been eradicated from the system during its stage right beforehand, during that nymph stage. But again, there is still a slight risk during this stage. The female, once she is fed, she drops off. She drops off the host, lays her eggs, and dies. And males, they typically die after the mating process, so they don't have to eat as much. Now, how long do you think this life cycle takes, Jesse? If you had to wager a guess.
Like 4 months?
2 to 3 years.
Wow.
So oftentimes they feed once a year. So like their life cycle, like I said, it's crazy. We think of it just being a bug and it's like it does its thing. This is a very complicated system that it does, that it has to get the right hosts every single time to be able to further its species.
So a lot of them must die.
A lot of them do die.
Yeah.
So what it's called is how they actually attach to you. They actually have a name for it. So it's not like hunting, it's not flying after, it's not sit and wait. It's called quest. They quest. They're questing. And that's when they're just sitting and waiting.
Like Shrek. I'm already on a quest.
That's how I like to quest for dinner. I just sit, wait. So ticks, they can endure very long times without feeding. In either of the stages of life, larval, nymph, adult, they can go for months or sometimes over a year without a meal. They'll almost remain completely dormant. So this is why it's so difficult to control the population of these, because they'll just stop being active. They can just be inactive for so long a period of time that whatever is used to try and combat their population is ineffective. But they're most active during the warmer months, spring through fall. So even right now, if anyone's out there, even in these colder temperatures, you can still get and come in contact with ticks. And it's not like every year there's different stages of ticks that are out. It's like there are going to be all 4 of the stages active every single year. So it's not like, oh, I'm good every 3 years, I'm at risk, and then the rest of the years I'm fine. Like, no, there's multiple stages, unlike cicadas. So the last thing I want to get into then is Lyme disease. How does it enter your system? Because this is super interesting to me. And again, just helps you understand why you're not at risk when it is within that 24-hour period of when that first bite has happened. So the Lyme disease bacteria, after a tick has bitten onto a mouse, let's say, it's received the bacteria, it now drops off that mouse, it goes into a stage, it molts into its next stage of life, and that bacteria will stay in the stomach of the tick during that molting process. And it becomes completely docile. It doesn't move anywhere. It's not alive pretty much at all. And it will wait those months or over a year that tick waits for its next meal. And then when that tick bites again and starts feeding, as soon as that new blood is coming into that tick's body, that bacteria starts to reanimate. Now, the bacteria's goal is to get into the next host. It's nothing to do with the tick. It's not an accident on the tick. The bacteria is actively trying to get into you or into its host. What happens is the tick, with its siphoning, has a very cool system. Again, with its mouth, we didn't really get into too much of its mouth, but there's a constant flow of blood into it. And it's pumping blood essentially into its body. So the bacteria cannot go upstream into your body through the bloodstream. What it has to do is it burrows itself through the stomach lining of the tick, into the salivary glands of the tick, and then into your body, because the saliva is going into your body from the tick and the blood's coming out of your body into it. So the bacteria has to make its way from the stomach of the tick into its mouth, into the salivary glands, and then into you. For it to do that, it takes a long time. It takes 24 hours minimum for it to do so. So that's why there's no way you're at risk for Lyme disease if you catch a tick within a short amount of time. So again, one last reminder, make sure you do your tick checks after you're in the woods. One little story, I was out on the East Coast with my brother-in-law, Jacob, and we were stream fishing for trout. And I had one of those pants where they zip off halfway into shorts, right? So it has that kind of like half seam down your leg. And we got back to the car, and this is after fishing for maybe an hour. And he's like, just make sure you check for ticks. There's a lot in the area. I rolled up that little like flap that covers the zipper. On one leg, I had 12 ticks.
Wow.
Like that was one. I had like another 8 on the other side. They were everywhere. Like it was nuts. So again, just be wary. But again, I was able to find on my body. I flicked them all off. Fine. I never actually had one bit me at all that trip. So it's not as dangerous as people may think.
That's crazy. Those things are like little aliens. Remember, I said we do talk about aliens sometimes. It's like the alien face-hugging things from Alien. Ugh. Well, I told you Andrew would have a terrifying, interesting fishing fact. It's funny that the last few interesting fishing facts Andrew has done have been about parasites. So, I don't know what
they
that
interest
means.
me. I myself am a host to many, Jesse.
I need one of those psychiatrists out there to analyze what's wrong with Andrew. I want you to send me a message and be like, he's talking about parasites because, and then tell me the scientific reason, the psychological reason.
Maybe I have one. Maybe I have one in my brain and it's trying to bring awareness to its cause. It's taken over its host mind.
Terrifying. Anyway, thanks for that, Andrew. Andrew always gives us interesting fishing facts that actually terrify us, so then we don't want to actually go outside. Unfortunately, the rest of this episode is very similar. So this week's episode, we're actually going to do kind of a deep dive into something that is pretty frightening, I would say. Aspects of the great outdoors that have to do with wild animal encounters. Now, we're going to talk about some animals. We're going to focus on 3 animals today. We're going to be talking about bears, moose, and wolves. Now, these are all things that you definitely probably have seen or will see if you spend enough time fishing in Ontario. But we're also going to get into some of the myths and legends of these animals in Canada. So if you see something that's a little bit extra creepy and you think it's one of these things, it may be something a little bit scarier. So stay tuned for that. So I thought we'd talk about bears first. Now, I actually have a quick story. I actually think I saw a bear this year swimming in the lake. I was up in Algonquin and my buddy was like, look at that thing down there. And it was like through like way down the lake and we didn't have binoculars or anything. And all we saw was this big black head going across the lake channel there. And at first I was like, oh, it's probably like, you know, a deer or something swimming across, but it was black. And I think it was a black bear. So I don't want to say like it was a bear, but I'm pretty sure it was. But anyway, because they're fairly common, you know, especially if you go up to Algonquin Park, there's black bears everywhere. We see them even coming closer and closer to the city now. They saw a black bear up in Port Perry, which if you're not aware, that's literally like what, half an hour from Durham region, which is not too far from Toronto.
Port Perry is part of Durham region.
Yeah. So they do wander down from time to time. So seeing a bear in Canada, it's not that crazy. It's something that most people probably have seen. Now, there is a few different species of bears that you actually are very likely to see in Ontario. Now, you see all those movies about like killer grizzly bears and stuff. Apparently, there's no killer grizzly bears in Ontario, so you don't have to worry about that. But unfortunately, there's other bears that possibly could kill you. So the first one that is probably the most common, what's the most common bear in Ontario, Andrew? The black bear. And guess what? You know what it looks like?
Plentiful and delicious.
Yeah, it's a bear and it's black. That's why they call it the black bear. So some of the areas that it's in, it says that it's the most common bear species in Ontario. And there's estimated to be between 100,000 and 120,000 individual bears in Ontario. How accurate that is, who knows? They're definitely not out there counting every single one. Who knows? It says that you often find them in places of dense foliage and plentiful food sources, such as berries and nuts. So if you're with Andrew, he's a bit of a nut. It may attract a bear. Now, when it comes to behavior of black bears, this is what I found anyway every time I've seen a black bear. They're pretty shy and they tend to avoid humans, right? So like usually like the one time I saw a bear the best, it was just like in front of a dumpster. You know, you go up north and there's a dumpster where people throw garbage. The bears know, they're not dumb. They know there's probably food in there. And those bears are pretty like chill, like they're pretty used to humans. But if you ever run into a bear in the woods, they know you're coming. Like they can probably smell you 3 miles away. Their nose is so good, right? But generally when they see you, they run. They're not really like investigating. They're not curious. Remember we talked about the water snake a few weeks ago, how it's curious and it'll go up and see things? Bears are the opposite. They hear you coming, they go the opposite direction. Oftentimes people will sneak up on bears. Just like as they're walking, they turn around a corner and a bear's there and that bear's like, it's gone. It's not like, hey, what's going on? Like a cat? Nope, she's gone. So that's good. Right, Andrew?
Oftentimes you see their back end before you see their front end because they're running away.
I was going to say, sounds a bit weird, but okay, I'll take your word for it. So they're often most active during dawn and dusk, and they prefer to forage for food alone. That is good, because imagine if you walked down a trail and you turn a corner and there's like 16 bears all together. You're like, oh, hi guys. I just picture it being like on the Emperor's New Groove. Remember when he's walking down that path and there's all those like leopards just there? He's like, that's not good.
It reminds me of my Opa took my brother and I out to, they lived in Barry's Bay at the time. And we went to the dump one evening to show us the bears. So we just sat in the Durango, and we just sat there looking at, I think there was 4 black bear that was there at the dump, at the Barry's Bay dump, or waste transfer station, whatever it is. And yeah, we just like watched them like picking through everyone's garbage.
Yeah.
Like there is cool to see, because we're inside of a car, like they don't care that people are there. There's a bunch of people doing it back at the time, but the bears are there because there's food. They're doing their own thing, and they did not care about us.
Exactly. So you may think, what situations would the bears be slightly dangerous in, or very dangerous in? Because generally they're pretty shy. They don't like, humans in general. But they can become very dangerous. Most of the time, we think of the main thing. They're protecting their cubs. If you see baby bears, you do not want to be anywhere near there. That is one definite thing. But they're oftentimes coming into your camp sometimes because, like Andrew said, they smell food. That's why when you go camping, you always have to hang your food up into a tree in a sealed container, preferably, because bears will come along. I've heard stories of them tearing apart barbecues just to lick a bunch of bacon grease off the bottom. So they can be dangerous when they want to be, and they want to be all the time. Just kidding. I don't know. So anyway, the dangers of bears, there's 3 dangers here. And I thought we'd talk about these quickly. So one is unpredictability. So like any wild animal, I know people are like, oh, my dog would never hurt anyone, and then it tears someone apart. A bear is like that, but worse, because it's an actual wild animal. So it says that bears are obviously very unpredictable, and especially if you startle them. Remember I said you walk around the corner? That's why they have those bear bells. You ever seen those at the outdoor store, and it's just like two big bells that you put on like a bracelet as you walk, or it goes on your backpack so it jiggles around. I remember one time this year, we're going to Algonquin with my brother-in-law Joel for the first time, and I basically was joking to him that he had to wear those all the time, and I'm pretty sure he thought I was being serious, and I was like, no, you're good. So it's definitely not uncommon to see bears, rummaging through your cooler or something like that when you're camping. That's why definitely you have to keep things away from your site for one. You don't want to like hang your food like right above your tent. It has to be far away from your tent, also up in the tree. So bears are unpredictable. The other danger, like I mentioned, is mother bears. Bears can be crazy defensive and dangerous, especially when they're trying to protect their young. You've seen some crazy women trying to protect their kids. Imagine being a bear. Even crazier. Although I'd probably be more afraid of the woman, honestly. So the other thing,
with moms.
Yeah, don't. They got that bear power. So campsite intrusions. They said that black bears are notorious. That's like their rap name. Notorious bear, notorious for raiding campsites and searching for food. So this is one thing that we do when we're camping. We try to keep our campsite as clean as possible. Some people will be like, oh, I clean up at night when I'm sleeping. But sometimes if you leave food out during the day, generally bears will come around at night. But if you leave some food during the day, or even if you don't like wash your frying pan out, there's some grease or something in it, and then you go fishing, a bear can easily come through your site during the day and tear everything apart looking for food. So make sure you keep a clean campsite if you're out fishing and some back lakes, stuff like that. And that way you won't come across any of these bears. Now, the other terrifying thing about bears is I think black bears are not generally that big. So they may not seem like that intimidating, but polar bears are another bear that you can come across in Ontario. That sounds a bit crazy. Like, we live down in southern Ontario, but if you're in northern Ontario, polar bears are a legit thing. And unlike black bears, polar bears are more aggressive and curious. You've seen all those like little clips like on TikTok and stuff, and there's just like a guy inside of like an outhouse, and there's just like a polar bear sticking his head in, and he's like, hello. Like they are curious.
Or they have like the buses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the bears are climbing over the bus.
Yep. It sounds, thankfully, if you live down here where we are, thankfully, polar bears are primarily only found in the far northern regions of Ontario, particularly around Hudson's Bay. So, not near us, but if you live up there, please beware. Beware, get it? Anyway. So, they're opportunistic feeders, and they can cover great distances in search of food. Unfortunately, unlike black bears, which oftentimes are eating a lot of stuff like berries and stuff like that, polar bears are active predators, and their main source of food is flesh, which if you are fishing, you are flesh. So now this is
be a t-shirt.
The main...
If you are fishing, you are flesh.
Link down in the bio. Just kidding. So the funny thing about this article, it said, this is the key to not being dangerous around bears. It says, avoidance is key. Avoidance is key. Encounters with polar bears are rare, but they can be fatal without proper precautions. It's advisable to stay clear of their habitat, and if you're in polar bear territory, make sure you have bear-safe equipment, including deterrent sprays and bear-proof storage. So they're like, don't go up to a bear if you see one. They're like, avoid any area that could possibly have a polar bear in it. And if you're like some dude that lives up in like the wilderness with the polar bears, and you're like, these guys are crazy, I live with these guys, that's cool. But for the rest of us rookies, we're going to just stay as far away as possible from these polar bears. Now, here's some of the dangers of either bear. We're going to go through some of them quick. Surprise encounters. This is one way that you could literally die if a bear came up. If you stumble upon a bear, especially in dense woods or near a mother with cubs, like we said, it can lead to basically the bear attacking you, which is why it's important, like I said, with bear bells, to make noise when you're camping and you're hiking. Have bear bells. I've seen some people, they clap as they're kind of hiking, like, they'll clap as they're going through the woods. And, especially if you're like near a river or something where there's lots of noise anyway, the bear may have a hard time hearing you coming. So making a little bit of extra noise can be a good thing so that you don't have these surprise encounters and get mauled to death. We've all seen that movie, The Revenant, or whatever that was, with the Leonardo DiCaprio and the bear like mauls him. Not good. So we've talked about some of the threats and realities of bears in Ontario. Now, I thought maybe Andrew could kind of go through the legend and myth of a particular bear.
So this one, this takes place in the region of the Northwest Territories. It's the Nahanni Valley. It's often referred to as the Valley of Headless Men. Terrifying. Now, the valley itself, it is known for its stunning beauty, huge cliffs, beautiful rivers, but it's also shrouded in mystery and dread. Now, over the years, numerous people, they've been like explorers, prospectors, they've disappeared with no trace. They have no idea what happened to them. They're like, hey, we're going up here, and then they never heard from them again.
Nice.
Terrible. The odder thing is they have multiple occurrences where they have been found, but they've been missing their head. Hence, the Valley of Headless Men.
That's a fitting name, realistically.
Yep.
Say you had a fishing spot and you went there, and every time you went, you found someone without a head. The Valley of the Headless Men, right?
What's scary is it's not called the Valley of the Headless Man. It's pluralized.
Yes. We're laughing, but sorry. Yeah. Rest in peace, guys.
So these occurrences, they've fueled legends of like a giant killer bears that are said to roam this valley, and they hunt down anyone who goes into their territory. The Naha tribe, they are local Dene tribes. They are a warlike tribe of that subsection of category, and they have a vast oral history, as they often do, and they talk about vanished warriors. Sorry, the Naha tribe mysteriously vanished, leaving behind tales of their fierce warriors. So some people say that they're intertwined with these disappearances, but saying that sometimes they may still inhabit that valley, and maybe that's why they're vicious warriors. But it could be that maybe they just also got eaten by this giant bear, and they were fierce warriors and they got eaten. So what's the scientist supposed to do there? But a couple historical events, like recorded events. So early in the 1900s, two Métis brothers, Willie and Frank McLeod, they ventured into the valley in search of gold. There's gold in them there hills. And then when searchers found their bodies 2 years later, they were both headless, their bodies lying near their campsite. Now you might think, who would commit such an egregious act against these ones? Against peaceful protesters? We don't know.
Protesters?
Prospectors.
They were protesting.
They're protesting that not having gold.
Yeah. They're like, we need more heads. And then they got their heads removed.
But they're not the only ones. There were other prospectors. Martin Jorgensen. He was found dead under mysterious circumstances. And again, it's akin to, are these giant bears? Now, according to local lore, it is home to giant bears. The Nahanni Valley is home to giant bears, remnants of prehistoric times. And we think of like the sloth bears from like back then. Like, those things were massive. Now, they're said to be larger and more aggressive than modern bears, stalking and hunting those who dare to intrude upon their territory. Witnesses have claimed to see enormous tracks leading into the forest, suggesting that these creatures may still roam the wilds. So that's, yeah. So Jesse, next trip, Nahanni Valley?
Yes. Now, I think the funny thing is, all these stories, you would think, would deter people from wanting to go there. But it is actually the opposite. Let's see, Andrew asked me if I wanted to go there, and instantly I was like, nah, because I'm not dumb. But apparently, this area has drawn adventurers, thrill seekers, and mystery hunters from all over the world. I mean, people search for the Yeti, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think maybe finding a giant bear would be a bit easier? You just get a bunch of heads. You know, they like bait for bear. They just throw donuts and stuff. Get a bunch of heads, throw them into a barrel in the middle of the valley and just wait. I don't know. Like, I don't do bear hunting, but that's what I would do, right?
How'd you acquire those heads? Are they free trade?
They were ethically sourced, vegan. I don't know. You know, as an angler, they were probably artificial, but the bear wouldn't know because it had Berkeley power bait scent on it. So it's all good.
Genius. That would work.
As I can say, this is one area in Canada that I do not want to go to. And if you do see a bear that happens to be giant and literally for some reason is only looking at your head, it's probably this killer bear. So again, in all seriousness, if you see any bears, give it a wide space. Like, don't get anywhere near it. Try not to startle it. This is, you know, we're talking about funny here, but this is a serious matter. Obviously, don't. I've seen so many videos of people trying to get out of their car and get up close to a bear and take a picture of it, and the thing just attacks them. Don't do that. Stay away. They are crazily beautiful animals, but they're also wild animals. So yeah.
Essentially, what I've learned here, my takeaway from this is, human heads are the 2-bite brownies of the bear world.
Yes. Okay, I remember, on a side tangent, I can't verify this information, but I recall reading back in the day or watching a video when they said basically even a large grizzly bear, its mouth can only open so big that it can't actually get your whole head in its mouth. It can just like basically almost get it in your mouth. But these bears apparently are so big that they can just... So a huge grizzly bear, which is giant, like 9 feet high, and fit your whole head in its mouth. How big are these bears if they can literally just take your head off in one bite? They must be 12, 13 feet tall. So if you ever see one, take a picture, tag us on your Instagram post, and we'll repost it. Okay, guys? Anyway.
Make sure you upload it right away, because you might not get a chance 20 minutes from that.
It's true. Yeah. You know, because once your head's off your body, apparently you only can see for like 13 seconds or something. I forget anyway. So upload really fast.
Your iPhone won't unlock with facial recognition anymore.
The next animal we're going to talk about is something that we actually saw recently, and that is a moose. So why don't you take that one, Andrew?
So I love moose. I love them so much. I recently did an interesting fishing fact about moose. Yes. We're going into more moose. Excuse me. So, did you know that when a moose is born, the calf weighs 30 to 40 pounds and already stands at over a meter tall? Thank goodness humans don't have to push out babies like that. Talk about like fierce mothers. Man. Way to go, cow moose. Now, as the moose grows, we talked a bit before about the size. They can get between 800 and 1,600 pounds. Males typically weigh a bit more than females. They have had some in the past up to 2,000 pounds. They stand on average 6 feet at the shoulder. Keep in mind, that's the shoulder, that's not the head and antlers above it. So that could be even 2 or 3 feet higher. So think of something actually from the ground to the very top of its antler or top of its ears, that thing is 8 to 9 feet tall.
Oh,
That's a grizzly standing on its hind legs. Like, that's crazy. Of course, the most distinctive feature of moose, especially on the bulls, is going to be the antlers. Now they grow these antlers huge every single year, though. It is an antler. It's not a horn. Antlers fall off every year. They shed. But, things like cows and stuff like that with horns, those horns, they just grow continually over time. So when you see a bull moose with this huge rack, this massive antler, it grew it from the spring of that year into that fall. All that grew. And the span of those things, a full rack from a moose can be over 6 feet wide, and weigh about 40 pounds, just the antlers themselves. So that's kind of what we're working with as to what you're going to come across in the woods potentially. So let's talk about moose aggression. Now, sometimes they are aggressive. Usually they're not. It's pretty easy to avoid confrontation. You're lumbering through the woods. They'll hear you coming as well, similar to the bears. But if they feel threatened or provoked, they will attack. They will defend their ground. What happens is, as we encroach onto their territory, they feel harassed by us because we have, our dogs barking at them. We have even traffic on the roads, and these moose don't like it because this is their land and they don't want us on it. So this can lead to a lot of stress, especially in winter. Deep snow makes it hard for them to move around. And if you think that throwing a snowball at a moose is just harmless fun, it can lead to a pretty bad encounter. That sounds like something Jesse would do. He's like, Andrew, watch me peg this moose at 80 yards. Now, moose, they also seek rest. So a lot of times when people have interactions with moose, it's because they're already laying down. So sometimes it's in someone's backyard, near homes, in residential areas. And if people go and approach them because they think, look, it's having a nap, oh, it's resting, it's comfortable, it's like a cow in a field, and they go up to it, that is what can agitate that moose, and it will start to respond aggressively. Now, like us, I know with driving, we each have our tolerance level for when we start to get road rage. Some it's a lot quicker than others. Moose have the same scale. Some, they may put up with a lot, they may tolerate a lot before that aggression comes out. Some, they are very short-wicked. They are ready to go. Seasons also affect a lot. So seasons when moose are more likely to show aggression is during the fall mating season, the rut. Bull moose specifically become very aggressive at that time. They're competing for mates. They can look at any other animal, including humans standing there, or even cars or vehicles, as a threat to them and their ground, their area, and the females that they want to mate with that fall. Same thing with cow moose. With their calves, they're very protective of their young, like mothers, right? So if you see a calf alone, be very cautious, because I can pretty much promise you, unless there was a moose hit by a vehicle, that mother is very close by. And if she sees you approaching the calf thinking, this is a small one, it's only a meter tall, guess what? There's the one that's 2 meters tall going to barrel down towards you in about 10 seconds. So just be aware, take note of where it's at, but make sure you keep your distance. Now, something that gets a lot of people in trouble is feeding moose. I've seen it done. I've been driving through Algonquin Park, and I've seen people trying to feed moose on the side of the road. And in Algonquin Park, they're quite docile. They are used to, again, how much they're willing to put up with is pretty high, because they're used to seeing cars on the side of the road. That's where they are. But if you're trying to feed a moose, that's just asking for a big punishment.
Yeah. They don't like M&Ms.
No.
I just picture people feeding moose the dumbest things ever. You know what I mean? I have some peanuts in my car. No, man.
Here, have my ham sandwich.
Yeah. Sounds like
these
something
things,
city
no matter
people
what
would do.
You see. Yeah. We talked before, there have been occasions of domesticated moose. Those are very rare, but even in those instances, the reason why we don't have moose farms is because as soon as they break out of their enclosure, they become wild again. It requires constant domestication to keep them domesticated, as it were. So no matter what, a moose is never really domesticated. So they're always, no matter what they're used to, yes, it's Algonquin Park, yes, you might see 4 families standing 20 feet from the thing on the side of the road, don't be the 5th family because they have a limit. Now, how can you tell if a moose is showing signs of aggression? Look for things like raised hairs on their hump, their ears laying back, or if they're licking their lips. Maybe they want to eat your head. But if a moose is slowly approaching you, it's not a friendly gesture. People may think, oh, here, eat the sandwich I'm holding, and it starts walking towards them slowly, like, oh, it's being skeptical and wants to smell. No, it's walking towards you, so it has a better chance of hitting you when it attacks. So if you are encountering this, let's say you happen upon a moose by accident, it's important, keep something solid between you and it. A tree, a fence, a vehicle. I've seen moose move huge things, so don't think that you're safe there, but it's safer to have something between you and the moose. At least it's going to slow it down before it hits you. But always prioritize your safety over anything else. So make sure you're going to keep, if you're just an empty field, but hey, there's a fence, put the fence between you two. So what if you encounter moose blocking your path? If possible, look for another route. Try and get around it. Moose typically don't move. They typically move on their own after a period of time, but it can take a while. Sometimes they lay down and they're like, I'm going to lay here till I'm rested after 4 hours. So just find another route around it, pass by. Again, if you're walking past it, no matter how far away you are, try and keep something solid between you and that moose. Again, tree, fence, whatever. Never approach the moose if it can only escape in your direction, especially. So always make sure you can escape, but let's say you're entering into this big hole in the wall and there's a moose in front of you. It only has one place to run, and that's through you, not past you.
Top of you.
Pepper spray can be used in extreme cases, but it's a last resort. Often it's not necessary. Again, you can just back away, give it space. They're not out there to try and attack you. They're not predatory animals. They're herbivores. So it's not like their only reason for attacking is just because they feel threatened. Make sure they don't feel that way.
I feel like pepper spray is just going to make them more mad. It's not actually going to stop them at all. It's just it's like the little guy shooting Godzilla in the movies with little guns. It's like, that's not helping. He's just getting mad.
Yeah. So what do you do if a moose charges you? What are you going to do if a moose charges you, Jesse?
Am I with you? Well, you always said put
Sure.
something between you and the moose, so I would be like, Andrew, look over there, and then I'd run. Okay, here's my game plan. I feel like moose can run pretty fast, but they're not super agile. So I would run squiggly line around trees and stuff. And then he'd get thrown off because he wouldn't be able to just, drive in a straight line and crush me. That's what I would do.
That's one option.
That's the wrong option.
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crap my pants.
I was going to say that, but...
But if a moose charges, again, best thing, find something to hide behind. Because, like I said, if you can put a big tree between you and that moose, it's not going to push the tree over. And it's going to kind of block its line of sight to you. Sometimes, though, like you said, running away from a moose is actually sometimes a good idea. If there are trees and you can kind of run away and perhaps keep solid objects between you and that moose, absolutely, run away. You don't need to stand there and be like, I guess I have to take this like a man. Because the moose is going to give it like a moose, and it beats man. But even a small calf, again, if you happen upon a small calf, they can weigh 300 to 400 pounds by their first winter. That thing, picture something that heavy running down at you. That's heavier than a lot of black bears that you might encounter. So you don't want to get hit by one of these things. If a moose does knock you down, let's say it caught you and you didn't run fast enough and there were no trees, it may start stomping or kicking you. In that case, curl up in a ball, protect your head with your hands, and stay still. Don't get up until the moose has moved a safe distance away, or it may renew its attack. It still thinks you're a threat, and it's going to come back. So that's called the fetal position. It's important to know if you are attacked by any large animal, basically rule of thumb is protect your head with your hands and just tuck into a ball as much as possible. So, pro tip. Now, do you want to go into the legend surrounding a very special type of moose?
Yeah. So again, all of these legend animals are actually stuff that you could possibly see in Canada. So this is actually a cool one. It's called the cursed white moose. And it's pretty cool. There are documented cases of actual albino mooses, which we'll get into, but this is an actual legend or lore, you could say, about this cursed white moose. Now, white moose are oftentimes revered in a lot of indigenous cultures as sacred animals, but unfortunately, there is a darker side to the lore. So in some Algonquin tales, it's believed that killing a white moose brings a curse upon the hunter and their land. Those who harm this rare animal might face bad luck, crop failures, or even death. Now, if you see a white moose, one, I would be in awe because, not that I've seen a lot of moose, that just seems like something that is extremely rare. My first option would not be to shoot that thing myself, but now you may double think not to shoot it because it may bring you bad voodoo. Bad. So you may not have, crop failures, but you may die. Just a warning, guys. So the albino moose had significant spiritual meaning for many cultures. And one of the things about seeing this thing, if you see a white moose, it could be seen as a message from the creator or a symbol of transformation. Now, I have no idea what that means, but it sounds pretty cool. So in Algonquin, park officials and conservationists have been working to monitor and protect these rare creatures because there have been sightings. And there aren't any specific programs to protect albino moose. Efforts to preserve their habitats benefit the entire moose population in areas like Algonquin Park. So if you do see an albino moose, from my understanding, again, this isn't a hunting podcast, but from my understanding, they're not a protected, just because they're an albino doesn't mean they're protected. But basically, the whole bad thing where you might die and you get cursed, I don't know. You might not want to risk it. Now, you may think,
your gun will rust before you get back to the truck.
Yeah. I don't think that these are actually real. Well, guess what? They are. Speaking of albino moose, they are very rare. It's a rare variant of just a regular common moose, but they actually have a white coat and light blue or pinkish eyes, just like a regular albino. Like I'm sure we've all seen like an albino rat and it's like white and has red or pink eyes. Imagine a moose like that. Not a rat, but that color. So
picture a albino rat. Put 20,000 pounds on it. Or 2,000 pounds.
Now, how uncommon are these? Well, they're very uncommon. It says that this only affects about 1 in 20,000 moose, making pretty much seeing one probably something that will never happen, but they are there. Now, Algonquin Provincial Park, which is a park that we go camping at, it's huge. It's massive. It was established in 1893. Lots of prime moose habitat, as me and Andrew know from seeing a bunch of moose in there. And it has estimated between 3,000 and 5,000 moose. So think of how large that area is. That is a massive area, and there's only up to 5,000 moose. So the odds of seeing an albino moose is 1 in 20,000. So the odds of there being an albino moose in there is pretty slim, but there have been sightings. So that is cool. Now, we actually saw a moose the other day. I thought we should mention that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going up to North Bay to do some fishing. And it was probably like 9:30, 10 at night. It was pitch dark. And we're whipping down the road. I wasn't paying attention. And Andrew slams on the brakes. He's like, was that a moose? Turns the car and the boat around, starts driving the other way. And this moose, it wasn't a huge one. It was like a young male moose. Maybe 2-3 years old, maybe. I don't know how old
I'd say 2 or 3 years. It had a full rack. Wasn't a huge, wasn't fully built up yet, though.
It wasn't like a giant moose, I would say, but it was big.
No more than 3 years old.
Yeah. So it wasn't white, unfortunately. But it is always cool when we saw a moose. We put a poll up on Instagram and we said, seeing a moose, good luck or bad luck on the way to a fishing trip. And everyone said good luck. We got skunked that trip. So unfortunately, it was bad luck. If we had seen a white moose, it would have been a sign from the creator and good luck. But unfortunately, it was none of those things. So yeah, just keep in mind for moose, like Andrew pointed out in the facts, they're giant creatures. They're huge. They're dangerous. Sometimes they're on a short fuse. Stay away from them. Don't get out. Don't try to feed them a ham sandwich. Just avoid them. And don't do anything dumb, and you will survive. Now, The next one, why don't you cover the first part, Andrew, of wolves?
The wolves. So there have been a lot of research and stuff done into wolves. And the big question is, are they dangerous to humans? Again, that's the topic of our episode, is dangerous animals we may encounter. But are they? So there was a big study from 2002 to 2020. John D.C. Linnell at the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research showed that there's a total of 26 fatal wolf attacks globally within that time frame. So within about 18 years, 26 fatal wolf attacks. Among these attacks, 14 were directly linked to rabies. So that shows an essential aspect. So the risks with wolf attacks is real. That's again, with rabies, that's a whole other ball game. Lots of creatures, rabies will bite you. Doesn't mean that's wolves are prone to it. They were diseased, but that still leaves, if my math is right, 12 other fatal wolf attacks. So there is a risk. It's above zero, but it's too small of a risk for them to calculate. They can't put a number to it. So it's very likely that we can encounter a wolf, but encountering a dangerous situation with a wolf is extremely rare.
It's like the saying they say, it's rare, but it happens. But it's rare.
It's like your odds are never, the odds are slim, but never zero.
Yes.
So we're going to look at wolves specifically. What is a wolf when we're talking about it? The gray wolf is the largest wolf in the dog family. There's several subspecies of the gray wolf in North America. These are the Arctic wolf, the coastal wolf, plains or timber wolf, northwestern wolf, and eastern wolf. Now there's a lot of different stuff that changes between those subspecies, but we're going to lump them all under wolf. And the most common one we have around here is often the eastern wolf, which some claim to be a distinct species altogether. But wolves, they play a vital role. We think of what's the purpose in nature in their role. So they are active hunters. So they regulate prey populations. Think of deer. When there's a good wolf population, the deer numbers aren't astronomical. But it kind of ebbs and flows as it goes. There's not enough deer to feed the wolves populations dip. Now the wolves, they balance the ecosystem because they're also scavengers and whatnot too. But their prime help is they regulate a lot of prey. Those are some big dogs that have to feed regularly. But what about folklore about wolves? There is the legend of Wahila, known as the snow beast. Now we think about wolves taking care of prey populations. What if we were the prey population? Now we're going to revisit a really cool place we talked about earlier in this episode, Nahanni Valley.
Never go there.
If that sounds familiar, if you can avoid the head-eating bears, you too can encounter the fun, exciting world of man-eating wolves.
With supernatural abilities.
Yes. Do you want to go into what the description of the Wahila and some stories about that one, Jesse?
Now, it's definitely a cool creature to look up because the pictures of the artist renditions of these things. I'm sure most of us have seen a picture of a wolf, and I guess when you look at a wolf, usually you're like, oh, that looks like a dog, like a husky, right? It's not until you see a picture of a husky sitting beside a wolf that it shows you the size difference of an actual wolf. They're huge. Now, this particular creature, the Wahila, it's way bigger. So the pictures of the renditions that artists draw of this, it's white. It's huge. So this thing, I'd have no problem running up, grabbing Andrew and just running into the woods, and I wouldn't be able to say anything. So again,
it's got to compete with those giant bears.
Well, for sure. Here's the thing. I don't know why they can't just work together. The bear takes the head, the wolf takes the rest. Partnership.
Maybe that's why they don't find a lot of bodies. They only find some without heads. There's a lot of people that just go missing altogether. It might be because of that great working relationship.
So these Wahila are described as a massive wolf-like entity. And they're believed to be responsible for not just a few, but a whole bunch of mysterious deaths in the area, which again is in Canada. So don't ever go here. Your wife's like, guess what? I booked some camping. We're going to go to this, was it Nahanni Valley? You're like, oh, no. It's too late to get a refund. So again, this valley, like Andrew said, it's often called the Valley of the Headless Men. Witnesses have actually claimed in recent years to have seen the Wahila and describe it as a solitary creature much larger than an average wolf, with features that resemble both wolves and bears. So maybe, during that partnership, right? You got a nice, handsome bear, you got a foxy wolf, you got married, had a baby, and it turned into a wolf bear that only likes to eat heads. This explains the whole episode right here, people. This explains everything.
It's a boy. What shall we name it? Wahila.
Many indigenous peoples in the region have woven stories about the Wahila into their cultural fabric. They basically say that it is a crazy supernatural animal with extraordinary powers. Some cryptozoologists speculate that sightings of the Wahila may be linked to populations of prehistoric bear dogs, known as some weird name, which I'm not going to pronounce. While others draw parallels with the Inuit mythological creature known as the Amarok, a giant wolf said to hunt solitary hunters. So that's terrifying. Unfortunately, this is something that, people said that they've seen. It's kind of like Bigfoot, though. People have said that they've seen Bigfoot, but not a lot of people, not a lot of people believe them. But it'd almost be more believable if someone told me they saw a giant wolf than Bigfoot. I don't know. Not too crazy. Mm-hmm. But anyway, there was actually a guy named Frank Graves who was hunting in this valley. Yeah, Frank Graves. Guess where he went after this trip? The grave.
To Frankenville?
Frankengrave.
The grave.
Yeah, so this guy, he was hunting in the Nahanni Valley in the 1960s. Now, I don't know if this had the reputation yet. Actually, it did. So this guy's pretty dumb. Had the reputation of, not having a head. So anyway, he went hunting there in the 1960s.
Rookie move, Frank.
Yeah. He described an enormous white creature that resembled a dog, but was far larger than any wolf he'd ever seen. And he said during this encounter, he felt a mix of fear and awe as he prepared to defend himself with his shotgun. He fired twice at the creature, and it simply turned and ambled back into the woods, leaving him both terrified and bewildered. So he literally popped off 2 shots of a shotgun, and this huge wolf just walked away. It's not worth my time. So anyway, one native recounted a chilling encounter with a creature that he described as having an 11-foot body with a 4-foot-long tail, emphasizing that it had a terrifying presence and that he said that it was invulnerable to weapons. So this is pretty crazy. Now, another sighting, this is more recent, a pilot named Tex. It's a cool name for a pilot. He shared an experience of spotting an enormous solitary wolf-like creature during his flights over the Alaskan wilderness, which basically fueled speculation. So, people, there's legends and stuff of giant wolves, but when someone in modern history sees something like this, it kind of is okay, maybe it is real.
We need to get him on the podcast. I can just picture it, my name is Tex Ziegler. I saw a giant wolf flying my plane over the...
This guy's probably long dead by now. All right, that's going to be Andrew's homework for next week. I need you to track down Tex Ziegler, the pilot from 1960. He's probably dead. And maybe you can talk to his grandchild or something that he told the story to.
So one thing I wanted to talk about, actually, because we've talked now about 3 different creatures that you're likely to, fairly likely to come across. Perhaps not as likely to be in a dangerous encounter with, but potential is there. And we talked about ways to stay safe. But I wanted to look at which ones are actually really threats here. Jesse's been known to kind of spout some pretty interesting tales. So he's talked a good game, but let's talk about some actual statistics as to how dangerous are these things. So for bear attacks, I found some numbers here. So from 1990 to 1999, there were 11 total bear attacks in Canada, resulting in 14 fatalities, which means bears are attacking more than one person at a time. In the next decade, 2000 to 2009, there's 13 attacks, 13 fatalities. From 2010 to 2019, there were 9 attacks, 10 fatalities. And that was just in Canada. So again, grizzly bears, black bears, polar bears, they are dangerous, especially if you don't know what you're doing with them. With wolves surprisingly have a low number of attacks. In fact, ever recorded in the United States, there's 14 attacks in the lower states, 2 attacks in Alaska, and 5 attacks in Canada. These were fatal attacks of all time recorded. So you look at those numbers, like that's a lot lower than like a decade of bear attacks in just Canada. For non-fatal attacks, there were 12 in the lower United States, 8 in Alaska, and 21 in Canada. 2 of them were in the Arctic Circle. So that's, there's a fair number, but again, that's of all time. So that's decades and decades and decades of stuff. And what may come as a surprise to you, the most dangerous animal that we talked about is the moose. And that's because when you hit them with a car, you pretty much die. So moose actually attacking humans. In Alaska, for example, there are about 10 reported cases of moose attacking humans, whether it be like in a residential area, however. But the thing what makes moose so dangerous is there are roughly 500 road accidents every year as a result of moose collisions with motor vehicles in just Canada. 500 a year collisions. And if you haven't bothered at this point or didn't, pick up on the description of a moose, if you think it's just a deer but a slightly larger, you are very mistaken. If you hit a deer with a car, your hood, like the deer will kind of knock at the legs, lands in your hood, breaks off your car. Sure. If you hit a moose with your car, you drive out underneath its legs, and then the body of the moose, the 1,500 pounds, lands on the roof of your car and crushes you. That's why they're so dangerous. And that's why when Jess and I saw one, that's why I slammed on the brakes so hard when I looked over and just saw like legs running beside the car in the ditch. Because you don't see the body, you see legs moving at night. So that's why they are actually one of the most, they're listed as the most dangerous animal in Canada. And one other fun thing, which I didn't realize was going to be on a list of dangerous animals in Canada. We don't have many around here, but elk. Elk are apparently very aggressive to be in the deer family. They do not like people and they will attack them.
Pleasure.
But maybe we'll talk about that on another episode in the future. But we don't have many. We do have some in Canada, or in Ontario. But I know personally I've seen everything we've talked about. And one last thing I wanted to mention is coyotes. Coyotes have way more attacks than wolves. I will have some good news. Is coyotes, there's only been 2 fatal attacks that have been ever confirmed on humans. That's because they only get to be about 30 to 40 pounds tops. But one was in 1981. A coyote grabbed a 3-year-old child in the driveway, and he dragged her across the road, and then she died in surgery due to blood loss. So that was, and a broken neck. So that was one, again, 3-year-old girl. 2009, 2 eastern coyotes mauled a 19-year-old singer-songwriter, Taylor Mitchell. And again, she passed away in the hospital later on as well due to injuries and blood loss. So again, way more amount of attacks from coyotes. Thankfully, they're smaller dogs, so just give them a good kick to the head or, chuck a rock at them and we'll be all right.
This podcast ended in a morbid thing about Andrew's coyote maulings. Anyway, just to wrap up this podcast, yeah, pretty much there are a lot of dangerous creatures that you could encounter when you're fishing in Ontario. I know this wasn't a particular fishing podcast, but every once in a while we like to throw one of these lores and legends, and I thought we'd wrap it in with some Canadian animals that we've generally see when we're out fishing. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Next week we'll be back with another awesome fishing episode. We actually have a pretty cool lineup of episodes coming up that are going to focus on a lot of winter fishing so that you guys can get ready for the winter. And like Andrew mentioned before, we actually have a surprise mega giveaway coming up, which is actually going to be on Instagram. Not really we're going to be talking about it on the podcast, but it's not a podcast giveaway. So make sure you follow us on Instagram. We're going to be giving away, we can't even build the beans right now, but it's giant. It's huge. It'll set you up for ice fishing season 100%. Anyway, we'll let you guys know about that when we can. when we're allowed, when the contract allows us to do so. But anyway, we'd like to thank our Patreon members. Again, you guys and girls donate a few bucks every month to help cover the cost of the show. The show does have costs to operate and to run, for all the stuff that we have to pay for, the editing software, the AI stuff. Andrew doesn't even exist. He's all AI. And I have to pay $22.50 a month for him. Just kidding. No one would ever buy that, Andrew. I mean, X12, whatever your name is.
Thank you, Jesse. I have to poop now.
There are expenses to the show, so we do appreciate you putting forth a few bucks every month to help us not have to pay out of our own pocket. We really appreciate that. And we do, try our best to get some really good giveaways to, get you guys some gear in your pockets. Well, don't put fishing lures in your pockets. That's a bad idea, but get you guys some stuff so you can, win some lures and stuff like that. So you can be ready for, the season. Also, ice fishing is coming up real soon. We're going to have a lot of really cool ice fishing season videos coming up as well, podcast. So to end this episode, we have, as tradition states, the quote of the week. And to handle that, Andrew.
Stay away from northern Canada unless you want your head gone. PSA, that's all.